Become the champion in your market with BASF Advanced Process Solutions. Do you want to reduce cycle time, increase touch time, increase on-time delivery, reduce parts ordering errors and redundancies, reduce work hours without reducing sales? With APS, you can reduce stress, tension, and the daily chaos while improving productivity, profitability, and overall performance. It's time to discover advanced process solutions from BASF. Start building your future today. Talk to your representative to learn more about the APS program.
Since the launch of 90 Line 25 years ago, Glasurit has been a leader in refinish and waterborne innovation. Today, Glasurit continues to offer innovative products with the introduction of 8 high-hiding waterborne toners. Glasurit Color Advanced Boosters. Glasurit Color Advanced Boosters offer many benefits for collision repair facilities. Ultra-high pigment concentration enables better hiding with less material consumption. Reduce 90 Line base consumption by up to 50% with the Color Advanced Boosters. In some cases, these boosters completely eliminate the need for gray shade undercoats. Fewer coat applications allow for shorter process times, generating higher daily booth throughput. Lower base coat film thickness enables faster and harder curing, improved tape resistance, and easier sanding ability. Glasurit has more than 7,400 color formulas and over 1,500 colors that are available with a Color Advanced Booster option. As a supplement to the current 90 Line mixing bases, Color Advanced Boosters are ideal for all body shops that want to turbocharge their efficiency and profitability. Finally, you can lower your material consumption, increase your profits, and decrease your process times. Please contact your BASF account representative for questions, or visit us at basfrefinish.com.
Welcome to Repair University Live. Thanks for joining us today. This is the show that we had promised last month, but then we pushed it because of the recent trial situation and some things that were going on in Texas. We thought that was a timely discussion, and Erica could join us. That was great. BASF was gracious and said, yeah, that's important, so we're going to talk about it. Today we're going to talk about refinishing issues around Quadcoats, translucents, some of the special, we have to call them special effects coatings that are out there on the market these days that we're encountering in the body shop, and then how that affects our estimating and profitability. Brian, thanks for joining us. All the way down from St. Louis.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I thought we'd maybe get you a little bit better weather, but no.
You know, it's a little warm.
We're gonna sweat today in the shop. This is how work really works. You know, I don't know. We don't have a whole lot of air-conditioned shops in Arkansas and the South, so.
A lot of go out in the heat.
Yeah. Well, this will be a good thing, right? We're gonna, in the natural habitat of the painter.
Oh yes.
Cooking to death, right?
Cooking to death, yes.
Yeah. So, well, let's just get right into it. Color complexity has exploded over the last relatively 5 years. The technology, not new. Some of these colors that we're looking at have been on cars since 2012 models, but now they're on lots of cars, not just the high-end cars. So it used to be only if I was like you, Larry, at the shops you work at, I would see these cars, but now they're on Mazdas and lots of other cars that are around us. And Brian, what's driving all of this with the OEMs and what they're picking? I mean, you guys are working with them all the time. Why are we getting so complicated with color?
Sure, you know, it's a technology boom, really. You know, everybody wants the latest, greatest thing. And our cars, that's what we're looking for with our cars. It's who's got the coolest paint, what's the newest paint. It might be the same model car, but it's got to look good. So that's what's driving it. Who's got the latest, greatest?
Does any of these color issues, I mean, I know, you know, we in the shop we're trying to recreate these effects. Does it affect them in manufacturing? Do they think about, I mean, does any of these colors add cost to manufacturing the vehicle through that paint process?
You know, absolutely there is. There's an added cost, but it's minimal in relationship to what the car costs. You know, if a car's $30,000, what's another $700-800 on the ticket for the color you want? You know, that excitement that builds with the color you choose. So it's minimal when you compare it to the price of the new car.
Yeah. Well, the color palette that we're showing here, this is actually BASF's 2017-2018 color palette OEM. It came from the design team, and you kind of, the overarching title for what this color palette was named pays homage to translucents. So it sounds like going 18, 19, and to 20, we're going to see many more translucent colors at the market. And what I love about this color palette is they're not all reds, right? There's a lot of muted tones here in the transparent market. Are we going to see a lot more transparent colors?
Absolutely. That's a trend that's not going to go away. Those translucent colors make colors vibrant. You know, that's what makes them stand out. So that's the new norm, if you will, moving forward.
Right. That's kind of scary. Let's talk a little bit about how OEMs, when they choose a color, and then how we end up getting a color match in our world in refinish, because there's so many things I can do at the factory. I get to cook at different temperatures. I get to paint without any interior in the car. I get, like, it's a blank canvas, so to speak. But then when you wreck it, pulling it out of the lot right after you've bought it, I have to try to recreate this. Let's talk a little bit about the team that every paint company has them. BASF, sure. You have a team as well. How the paint team works with the OEMs.
Sure. So, you know, it's all about the relationships. It starts with the design teams, both at the manufacturer and the color design team with BASF. And you know, they follow those trends with colors. So it depends what the OE is looking for. And any specific manufacturer, you know, will be the lead on color development for a particular color. What's nice with BASF is we're such a large company, we supply a lot of the OE colors. And there's a lot of that direct handoff information to the refinish lab to develop the aftermarket coatings.
All right. Now, not always, with every paint manufacturer, there's always a situation where my paint isn't necessarily the one that was selected by that OEM. So let's, you know, another paint company has designed a color, but now we've all got to figure out how we're going to match it. And that's when our color labs come into play. How long ahead of time are you guys working with color to have an aftermarket refinish solution before that car's hitting the road?
Well, you know, obviously, in perfect world, you want it months in advance. You know, the challenge with that, obviously, is if you weren't the manufacturer at the OE level to capture that. And sometimes some of the problems is we don't get the OEM standard to follow until the car's after it's put in production. Those cars could be sitting on a lot. They could be in transit. They could be anywhere. So it could be as, you know, little as, you know, a few days. We could have a few weeks lead time. It just depends on the situation. Something I've recognized with this is some of the offshore built cars coming in, they're on the road before we actually have colors developed if we weren't involved in the design process. So
right.
It's a moving target.
Mazda, the 46G, is that, I mean, that's a color that feels like it kind of slipped up on us. I mean, we were all pretty good to go with RR from Ford and some of the others, but it feels like 46G kind of like smacked us in the head, and we were all kind of running around chasing our tail on that one. Is that maybe an example of a car that got out before we were ready?
Yeah, absolutely. And the process, you know, the process at the OE, how they coated the car is different than the refinish world. So it could be something as simple as, yes, we can make that color, but hey, we got to develop a toner to match this, to get it in the color field we're looking for. So sometimes those are delayed behind the scenes. You know, proper lead time always helps with that.
Right. Well, let's go into the three coats that we're going to kind of focus on here today. So we want to focus on the three kind of the most common things that you're going to run into the collision center. We're going to go over some application issues with those, a little bit background on them, and then we're going to get into the estimating of them, because not only are we losing money on every car we're painting anyway, these are some cars that we're losing more money on when we're having to paint them a little bit. So we're going to talk about the translucents, the quad coats, and then those special effect coats, and that's that beautiful Lexus quad coat and that I love so much to look at. One day, maybe. One day, I'll get one of those cars. Let's talk about the anatomy of a translucent. Brian, explain the translucent colors to us and what that really means. We've got a lot of people in the audience that aren't painters.
Sure.
Some are just estimators, some are insurers, and we hear this term thrown around, but let's break it down.
Yeah, so, you know, starting at the ground level, we all, you know, back in the day, the candy apple reds, you know, everybody loved to look at that color, but what was it? So with that being said, you know, we have the panel or the body panel. We'll have a layer of primer, and then we'll put the the ground coat color down to build the shade of gray we're looking for, and that's just simply for coverage. And we can achieve that through primer, we can through sealer, what have you. Then we'll add the actual color, and the color will be what has the mica, the metallic to reflect the light. That'll be the second stage of it, and then the third stage, or the tri-coat version of it, will be a transparent color. In the case of the Mazda color, it's like a candy red. It's a transparent red. So that's applied over it to bring depth and vibrance to the color.
And the clear coat protects
And the clear coat,
all the material up on top, and also helps with the UV
Yeah.
protection. It gives it a little bit more depth.
Absolutely.
Depending on how you work it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which gives you a nice effect, which is probably the issue with that Mazda that Kristen brought up, and why you guys had trouble getting to market with it. It sold faster, that color, than what probably was anticipated.
Oh, everybody loves it, right?
You see that with certain colors, that they'll sell faster than other colors, and you're kind of shocked that it's like, okay, we brought this new color out now. Oh, wait a second, we're selling a lot of them, and we didn't pre-plan properly.
Yeah.
You know, with the paint manufacturers, meaning the OEMs, and now you have an issue where you got a car out there, and now I'm calling up my paint rep. It's like there's no formula in your system. You know, you almost got to create something, so that can be an issue when a color hits. And these colors, like you said, pop to the eye. They're brilliant. They're vibrant. They catch your eye, and that's the idea behind them.
Yep.
Yeah, you can definitely tell when you see one coming down the road. But let's talk about what the application considerations for those colors are. So the first up on our list is a little bit different of a method, and Brian and I talked about yesterday a little bit. I stopped painting years ago, but back then it was pound the product
back then
on.
with a roller.
I did have a roller.
Yes, you did.
And a brush.
Yes.
And I had like a brush set.
Yes.
It was fantastic.
It was very cute, yes.
You were jealous.
Uh-huh.
Pink handles and everything. It was awesome. But back then, we used to teach painters, you're almost going to like pound on the product, right? We got to cover. And now with some of these colors, it's more about paint to match than paint to coverage. It's kind of a different mentality when we go in the booth.
Sure.
And is that something the painter needs to be thinking about?
Oh, absolutely. There's two things to consider talking about that. Obviously, with many of these colors being transparent, our ground coats are very, very important with that. And secondly, with the colors at the OE level when these vehicles are manufactured, they're hardly putting color over their primer. So generally what you see sometimes, you're looking at a metallic primer, you know, in certain spots of the car. So depending on where that vehicle is repaired at, you know, sometimes you throw out the window of here's my color. You've got to go in and recreate what the manufacturer did.
Right, and then spray out.
Lots of spray outs.
Right.
Lots of spray outs.
So we have a lot of painters that love their magic cabinet, right?
Yep.
And we've even seen magazines do some articles on, check out my lovely spray out collection cards that I have over here in my cabinet. Does that really work with a translucent, or is the painter each and every time going to have to create that situation and recreate those spray outs to know exactly what he's going to have to do with his color?
Right. Well, you know, honestly, both. It'll definitely give him a great starting point. You know, if he's, you know, very documented what he's done on his previous spray out cards, he's got a pretty good idea going into that. But it's very, the necessity of doing those spray out cards is important to achieving that color success on that vehicle.
You should be doing it in every car. You really do, and you got to make sure you cover it the right way. And as we talked earlier, you got to make sure you use the clear coat on there. You can't be pouring the wax and grease remover or water on top of it.
Yeah.
It's not
Spray
going to
check?
the problem is because
Clear coat.
And this is what guys don't understand is that, like we spoke earlier about it, the reason it's not purely clear coat is because it has all the UV protection in it, and water or wax and grease remover do not have that, and that's why it's got that slight tint, and that's how you're going to match your color properly, especially when you get into these high solids and these mica colors that are going to become a main issue, and as more and more nanotechnology that we're seeing now will become more the forefront, and that'll be an issue for painters. They got to get used to it now. They really do.
Right. With these colors, with these translucents, am I maybe doing more spray outs than I would with maybe any other color out there? Is it?
There's a lot more work in the back of the shop with the technicians. We all like to think we can hit it on the first try, but real world is you're going to spend quite a bit of time back there. You know, even for the high production shops with guys multitasking, they might be looking at color throughout the entire day while they're doing other things. So it's important to allow enough time to achieve that color success.
All right.
And I'll be honest, some of these shops, the damage assessors or estimators, or in many cases now the point-and-click guesstimators, are going to have to speak with the paint guys, in the paint department, to find out how much time is it actually taking you to go over these particular colors, or which colors are harder colors than other colors to actually match, regardless of if the car is brand new, it's 3 years old, it's this, it's that, whatever paint system you're using. You need to figure out and adjust for that amount of additional labor that needs to be put into that.
Yeah, communication's the key when you deal with these difficult colors.
Right. Let's talk about that ground coat. So I know, for BASF, they're called L shades.
Yep.
Every different paint manufacturer has a different way of kind of referring to those. Sometimes 5 to 7 different variants in that ground coat. What role does that ground coat play, and how critical of a step is that added to the process for the painter?
We like to communicate. Basically, it's mandatory at this point because, the days of spraying to coverage, there's 2 problems with that. You'll never get there. So there's a cost to applying, additional materials to the vehicle. That also helps expedite the repair process, so it's a quicker process. In addition to that, you don't want to put too much material in the car. Like we spoke earlier, you get into a mill build situation. You might put too much mill builds. You could have a failure. Yeah. So the L shades is to a speeder, quicker process and proper color.
Right, and what you mentioned there about the mills is critical. That's just something we've never really worried about in the paint department too much before. Larry, you have, because of the brands and stuff that you have to fix.
Well, yeah, there's a group of shops in the United States that will have an acclometer or something similar to this as a mill thickness gauge, and you'll have to measure the car prior to writing the estimate or during your estimate process or your damage report process to find out, where has it been repaired or painted before. And for a lot of times, for the car to be considered on an OEM, one of the real OEM programs for certified pre-owned, they're going to check the mill thickness, and it becomes an issue. Now I also have an issue with, not only do I have to resell this car where I have to reduce enough material thickness on the panel to be able to coat on top of it and have the same thickness or similar thickness to an undamaged car, but I have my paint company that's an issue. So if I go ahead and paint the car and you come in and I say, look, the paint failed, and you start taking mill thickness measurements, I'm at 15, 16 mils, you're like, listen, most paint companies are 9 to 12 mils. 9 to 11 really, but you're like 7, 8 mils over the maximum thickness. I can't guarantee this. I can guarantee the paint we produce that you guys put on the car is sticking to their paint, but I can't guarantee that their paint's sticking to the car. And on top of that, you have too much material. The thermal expansion and contraction of the substrates, aluminum and steel, has now caused this paint to stretch and literally break off the car. And that's part of the problem that damage assessors don't realize. And I believe a lot of painters don't also follow that same rule of taking a mill thickness gauge and checking some of this stuff out.
Well, now we've also, with the sensors, quarter panels and bumpers, we get it too thick, we're affecting that sensors or that system's ability to work with the safety and the other features of the vehicle. So we used to joke that paint can't kill you, or couldn't kill the customer. It was the one thing in the shop that was kind of safe, but now not so much anymore.
Yeah.
And these colors with the applications that they have to them presents a situation where we may be piling on a little bit too much material. So definitely something that the painter now has to worry about and check. Yeah. I've seen situations where we're taking it out of the booth in between different coats, and we're shaving off a little, and we're bringing it back in because we know we're already starting to get over there. Good time to talk about translucents, quad coats, etc. are very unforgiving refinishes. I joked, I did a little segment about a weekend ago with Jeremy Winters on Booth Talk, and kind of joked about how we used to teach adjusters how to paint with waterborne, because waterborne in some ways makes everyone look like a superstar, right? You can tiger stripe it, it can look ugly, you back up and just go, and suddenly you're Rembrandt with a paint gun and you look pretty awesome. But these colors are not forgiving, and this is where we really separate the painters from those that are appliers, right?
Yep. The chimpanzees to the actual real paint tech.
Right.
The
people like me to the Jeremys of the world, right? I mean,
well, the difference is that some of these base coat coats, if you mix the color the right way, and I have some idea how to apply it properly, I'm going to be able to match that color and spray it on properly because he matched most of the color. If I keep in the proper normal distances, it's going to keep within the color. But you're actually moving into now some of the stuff Years ago, John Kosmowski used to talk about and teach when he taught how to paint candies and pearls.
Yeah.
And when pearls weren't on cars. And now we're getting into that now, where your paint reps are going to have to come in and show you, listen, you got to watch your distance. You know, it's like we were speaking earlier about it. It's the difference between welding steel and welding aluminum. Both similar processes, looks the same, looks like the same exact equipment. Two completely different processes. Just like we spoke, base coat, clear coat can be forgiving. Even some of the new tri-coats can be a little forgiving when you're painting them. But these four-stage paints or multi-stage paints over 3 stages now become an issue where you have to watch your spray gun angle, your speed, your application,
air pressure,
how much cure time in between, and in some cases you got this Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Ferrari process where you got to let the clear dry, scuff it all, no, excuse me, not scuff it, but sand it to give more depth to it and put more clear coat on top of it, which is almost unheard of for almost most shops out there, what they've dealt with. That now I'm adding a complete, I'm painting it and then sanding it and repainting it again.
Basically building a custom car color, right?
Yeah. Basically, You know,
well, it'd be easier if we were painting the whole car in a custom type environment. We're trying to paint 2 panels on a whole car and make it match.
Yeah. And that's another issue that you're going to be getting into, where I see probably the paint companies now are already building their new training programs on not just how to mix our color and use our paint mixing system and, you know, how to read it and understand it, but now we actually have to run you through like a combat type training in a shop situation. It's like, you got this much time to paint these 2 panels and make a match.
Go.
Go.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Well, we're going to put you in a real shop situation.
I kind of always joke, I get the benefit of hanging out with some of the top customizers in the world, and they build fantastic cars and they do fantastic paint jobs, but I think in a way that is way easier than what our refinishers in the collision industry have to do. So the real paint artists aren't the guys that are on the magazine covers of Hot Rod. It's these guys in the body
Charlies
shops.
and the Chips and stuff. You know, what we see on TV is one thing. In the background, they run into a problem with a color trying to match them. There's 30 guys from BASF down there, you know, with their little slide rulers and their computers and their calculators, and they're mixing stuff in the back to make the color right for him. But they're using that information as research and development, but he's got that support. You're at a body shop and it's, 5 o'clock at night, and like, you know what, boss, I'll stay.
Car's gotta go.
I'll stay and I'll paint tonight. Now you run into a problem. Now you're really gonna count on your local paint rep to call him and go, hey, Mike, I got a problem. It's 6:30 at night. Well, I'll finish dinner right now. I'll come over and help you out.
Yeah.
You got one guy coming down to help you out. And you're trying to call up and get answers, and most of the places are closed, in the United States at the same time. So where does he get his tech support from? It's very difficult.
Brent, it brings up kind of a good question here. I think probably this is the time to talk about it. 10 years ago, we were pushing water pretty hard because of the coast, the east and the west coast, and what we thought was going to be some environmental rulings, and we were pushing shops to go to water, and around the middle of the country kind of stayed solvent or whatever. Then we had some great revolutions in low VOC solvent technology. Onyx HD is a fantastic example of a product that's on the market that we love for that. But now, some of these colors I can only get in water right now. Is OEM color and the application process, is that going to maybe make some shops that had previously thought they would stay solvent forever have to start looking at a water solution?
It could lead to that. Some manufacturers choose to put those resources of color match, color development, I guess is a better word, and they shift those resources to their water-based programs. Obviously, it's a newer technology, why not? BASF still continues to support both solvent and water, but you will find new car colors that are out. Some of the colors we discussed that are only available in water, and the reason you're seeing that is the pigment development is harder to achieve with solvent than it is water on some colors. So we can get there quicker with water, and that's our first opportunity as far as coatings go to repair a car.
Yeah. I've heard of a few situations recently where some shops have got some cars in, they're a solvent shop, that color's only available in water, and they're having to ask some other painters to kind of come in to help them from other shops, going, hey, you're used to water, come help us get this car delivered for the customer.
And the car's in the booth.
Yeah.
You run into some hiccups with that.
Yeah, and that's a great thing for estimators, color now is not just about being able to pick which Honda you have out on the lot, right? Your Honda shop, you have 7,000 Accords out there. It's the black one, right?
Yeah.
It's not just for identification purposes anymore. It's going to identify potential cycle time issues very early in the estimating process so that you can identify that, where you can have those phone calls not after you've pushed it in and it's taped up and you're like, what do you mean I can't paint this?
Right.
What do you mean there's not a formula for
when
this?
the car first comes in, during the damage analysis or blueprinting or whatever dopey catchphrase words you want to use, the damage assessor needs to speak with the painter and find out what this color is, what's the process with the color, how many spray out, lay down cards am I going to need, how difficult is this color, what's my blendability of the color, can I lose it within the door that I'm blending into, or do I have to paint the whole side? We're seeing more and more of that, where you got to paint the whole side of a car because of the high content of metallics and micas are causing you now to have a different flop. Even though you're painting it, it's two completely different type paint products, and now it's becoming an issue when you go to paint this and you blended the door. You don't see the difference in the blend of the door, but the whole car looks like it's a fade. From the factory color. You don't see where the fade changes, but the back of the car doesn't look like anything like the front of the car. Now you got to paint the whole side of the car. It's becoming an issue because of the different types of paints. This is where people get lost on some of this stuff. So this is why it's important at the beginning to find this out. Then you shouldn't have a car in the spray booth that only comes in waterborne. Right. It'd be like your painter would look at it and go, wait a second, I'll make up a number, 4BG. That's not we don't have a mixing formula for that. Let me call my paint rep. Hey, what's going on? Oh, it comes in water. Let's set it up. Before you bring it in the booth, I'll come down, I'll help you paint it, I'll show you what to do. We'll bring the water paint for you, and we'll go over that particular car for that color. Right. And that
planning
will help
ahead.
out.
I mean, we talk about it over and over in every episode. It's not as easy as it used to be, where pretty much any car that dropped on the lot, I had about the same process of repairing it, and I could accomplish anything. Those days are gone, where I really now must forensically almost investigate every vehicle as soon as it hits the lot and begin around repair planning that way, from issues that potentially will come up with refinishing like this, waterborne only application, or scanning, it's got to go to the dealer. I mean, there's a calibration required that's dealer only for targets. Well, that makes a huge difference on cycle time to the customer. Larry, you hit on it a little bit. Brian, we talked about it as well. These colors present some blend issues. We talked about minding the blend. And that it's, we used to think blend was a gift, right? Because I didn't have to worry about color match so much. But with these colors, blending is sometimes one of the more harder parts of the process.
Sure. Yeah, you get into the tri-coats and quad coats, you start stacking materials through your blend area. It could darken a blend if you're dealing with translucent colors. If you're dealing with like a high metallic situation, sometimes you could get paint drift onto your blend panels that you can't cover up. So there's some technical things that the painter needs to be aware of, and needs to focus on those attentions of honestly keeping that repair as small as possible, as controlled as possible, because it can get away from you pretty quick.
And that goes back to the guys who are doing body work and priming that have to keep their areas a little bit smaller or tighter when they're working with it, and watch how you prime and do things, because one of the worst things is I love when they do the flop of the paper and then they want to put a hard line later on after the car's painted because they did this flop of the paper. Set the whole panel up and just let it fade out easily. When you sand it, it'll all come off, but don't make that hard line, and that becomes an issue later on.
Well, I mean, that's a good point, because we all have that body tech that starts with a dent about this big, and by the time he's done, it's here. So,
and that's fine. Then you go into another panel.
I was gonna say, it could affect the next panel.
Or maybe that tech doesn't get that car.
It all depends. Listen, I've seen stuff done on a car where it's like, paintless dent repair would have taken most of that damage out. Yes, you have to sand it. Yes, you have to paint it. And yes, you probably had to put a little bit of filler on it. But if you had the paintless dent repair guy come in, he would take out a lot of it and would limit how far you go. It's almost like some of these body techs are more sculptors than they are actually, metal men. It was funny. Somebody posted on our favorite, Collision Repair Technicians United, it posted a picture of a cheese grater. And I go, what is this, from 1972? Who's using cheese graters? I mean, what are you, sculpting? So, I mean, this is the stuff that comes up. Hey, you want to save a pound, you want to sculpt, that's great. Less material is always better. You know?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about part orientation. So this is one of the things, Larry, when we're out re-inspecting shops, we see this on bumper covers all the time. It drives us crazy.
And then they wonder why the color doesn't match.
Yeah, I don't know why that matches. Brent, how important is it that a shop orientate the parts properly when refinishing them to get that color match with these colors?
Sure, yeah. You see that a lot. Use like a pearl white tri-coat, for example. A new part might have some sealer, base, mid-coat, and clear on it, and they go to reassemble the car. That lift gate don't match the bumper or whatever, and they were painted at the same time. So we like to paint those cars apart. It's quicker cycle times, quicker boot times, but there are colors that you need to be mindful of that painting them together, or even orientating them booth together in sequence is a must. So from panel to panel, it's continuous with the color looking the same.
Right.
You gotta have the panel sitting in the same plane it's going to be. You could take the fender off the 2 doors, blend out the quarter and the whole uniside, but the fender has to be laying like this. And it's funny because very rarely do you ever see them hang a hood standing upright. But for some reason, they'll take a lift gate and put it down, and they'll take a bumper cover and take it from, let's say it sits like this on the car, and they'll put it on a bumper stand, and it'll be sitting like this.
Right.
And always the top edges are always missing because they don't bend down to spray. Now you change the orientation, the way the flop, the paint looks and stuff like that. No different if you took a hood and hung a hood this way, sprayed it, laid it on the car, it's gonna look different to the fenders.
We taught ourselves that if we put bumpers up like this, I could put 5 or 6 in the booth that day, and I'll start my morning or I'll end my day with, I'm just gonna paint all the bumpers that need to be done today. Well, the problem with that is that then now when it's time to reassemble the car, when the job's done, orientation is different, the flake is laying different, orientation, whatever.
But that goes back to just being stupid again.
Yeah.
It's just being stupid. It's being, it's listening to these idiots that come in, these clown sultans that come in and tell you, oh, we're going to be lean. This is how we're going to do it. And it doesn't work out.
Well, there's some case to be made that several years ago that did work really well for me, and I could put through a lot of jobs or get to reassembly faster.
Match.
But now the colors are so different that
we've had
orientation,
a shift in the technology with color.
Yeah, it's just more critical than it used to be. Let's talk about quad coats a little bit. So now we have candies in collision repair, right? So I used to paint Hyundais dreaming of doing a John Kosmowski candy job, and now I'm doing candy jobs on Hyundais. What's up with that, right? But what we're showing here right now is a cutaway of the OE finish, how Toyota does their quad coat on the Lexus. And that's not really a quad coat, is it, Brian?
It's a lot of coats, right? Yeah, between corrosion protection, the factory E coat, and then their ground coat, they could have 5, 6 coats on there.
Yeah.
So the challenge is presented to us, in the refinish world is, being mindful of our mill thickness and whatnot. We got to get there quicker with less coats. Our application process puts on more paint than they do at the factory. That's a given. But when you start stacking this many layers of material, so how do we get there? We got to get there quicker with color match. We got to get there quicker with coverage. So the quad coats are introduced. It might be an L shader, a ground coat, a semi-transparent color coat, and then some candy or transparent mid coat on it, and then the clear coat.
Right, and that's when in the aftermarket process from Toyota, Toyota's best practice there is a quad coat process. So this is going to be a quad coat color on Toyotas, on the Lexus products that are out there that we're dealing with, and we're seeing more quad coats get released. It was the translucents from like 12 to now that we were dealing with. They're still on the uptick, but now the quad coats are on the uptick.
You're going to see a lot of it. It's once again, it's for sales. Most of the people who develop these colors for the OEMs are usually women. They design a lot of the stuff for that. And what guys don't realize is women are so involved in the designs of cars because they have a more in tune with the aesthetic look of a vehicle, the colors, or how is it appealing. Guys want muscle cars. The colors come from a lot of times the women. Even the vibrant reds that we see in a lot of these muscle cars, like the Mopars and stuff, they're developed by a lot of the women and stuff, and there's a crew of guys and girls together, but a lot of the colors are made by the women, and they have a better attention or a better grasp on the color that's going to pop and go. Now they sell the car, and it pops big time. Now everyone cheats off of it. Now everyone's got to come up with their own color red. So BASF is probably making 3 or 4 different of the same red. This just got to tint it slightly differently, so they're not exactly the same, because each manufacturer wants their own special red. It's kind of like for years, BMW had the M series, and they would paint the car a color that you couldn't get from anything else. You get some of the packages, but like the spoilers and the rims, but you couldn't get the color. That was strictly for M cars. And paint companies are poised with trying to figure this out, and then you're also got to figure out how do we repair it, because the paint's completely different from the factory as it is in the aftermarket field. I mean, they're baking at temperatures, of 400 degrees. We can't, many shops can't even get that. Many times you walk into a shop and they're having trouble, and they're like, well, I set the booth at 140, yeah, but the car is not 140. The material is 105,
110, right?
Yeah, so this is why you double bake it, or this is why you baked it twice. I don't know why you got to bake it twice. It's like I put my sandwich in the microwave, on number 5 for 3 minutes, and it's piping hot. But I'm going to do it again to make sure it's really cooked. No, now you're overcooking it. And the problem is they never got to that desired temperature, and now they bring it out and they try and buff it. And when they go and buff it, what happens? They wind up with all sorts of stuff moving around. Or when they first got waterborne, what was the issue with waterborne? They weren't moving the air around all the areas, and it would move like wallpaper underneath the clear coat a lot of times. Or they would wipe and clean the car, they put their hands on panels, and what would happen? Paint would peel off, and what'd you find underneath there? Handprints all over the place from the grease in your hands. This is, it's similar, but it's different. And this is why, this translucent 4-stage paints are going to be difficult for a lot of shops, because it's different, it's a change. And with anything, years ago when we went from, when you said you were painting, you went from lacquer to urethane, and you were like, what's this? I don't like doing this. This is not what I'm used to.
Yeah.
We didn't know it back then, but that was going to be the new norm, right?
So let's talk a little bit about what the application considerations for this are. So same thing as before, we're going to be mindful of the mill thickness. You guys have already talked about that. And then follow the manufacturer recommendations. How critical is that? I can't just make it up as I go along because I'm a painter.
We don't put that on paper for nothing. You have to. If you want that color match, if you how quickly you can get there with the number of coats for coverage, it's important. So you have to follow those recommendations. They're there for a reason. It's to help those technicians have success.
Right. Ground coats. So again, with the quad coats, the role of a ground coat again is that, can I, Brian, I want to skip the L shade. How about I just put down like a tinted, I'm just going to primer. I'm just going to have a black primer base or whatever before
I got some leftover paint from my black car. I just painted. I'll just throw that down instead. Because it's leftover material. I mixed too much. Let me throw that on.
And we all are guilty of that. We used to do that. Use up old materials or whatever. But the color development for color match on that paint variant chip that you have is dependent on what that L shade was or that ground coat was underneath. You have to have that to achieve that color.
Right. So it's playing a role like it's never played before.
Yeah. It's as important as the clear coat.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost more important at some stages because Okay. Let's talk about effect coats. I really want to not touch on them too much. We don't have a lot of those colors out there, but I really feel like it's going to get here pretty soon. A couple of effects coats. Hyundai on the Veloster has a matte type finish out there that we're trying to match in the collision environment. And then we have some now that require special treatment, like for instance what's on the Nissan or what's on the Lexus, right? Where I'm sanding the base coat at a 1500.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I mean, if you go back to it, you had said on the new Lexus that's going to be coming out, which is a similar paint job to the Nissan GTR, but now this is different. I'm painting the car like a black
or your ground coat. Yeah.
Ground coat is my black metallic, but the car comes out to be silver.
The effect coat, the metallics are grind so fine that you have to refine your sand scratches. If you just use traditional 600 grit, it's going to look terrible. This thing needs to be finished like a mirror before you put these coatings over it, these effect coats. There's a two-step process. You paint the car and you sand it, you paint it again.
And I got to sand in a certain direction.
Yep.
And if I don't use the proper coverage or the proper formula for coverages, it's going to highlight all my sand scratches.
Absolutely.
It's actually going to have an adverse effect of what I do. So this is where painters or prep guys especially the prep guys now. No longer is it, I could get my, I got a small little shop. I'm going to have my mom or dad come in and help me scuff a card so I can paint it. And basically, my mom can't screw it up because I'm putting full paint on the panel. So it's no big deal. It's black, it's white, it's a solid color, and my mom's going to come in and scuff all the black E-coat on the new panels I put on. Doesn't matter how she's saying, circles, left, right, up, down, two hands. As long as everything's scuffed, it didn't matter.
Right.
Now, I can't have my mom, my dad, my brother who's not in the business come in and help me out, because if they sand the wrong way, forget about burning through an edge, they sand the wrong way, it's going to cause a problem after I'm done painting.
Yep.
And now I'm going to find this out when I'm done painting and go, what the hell is that there?
Yep.
Right.
And that now becomes an issue.
So those are some colors where that's going to pick up a little bit. That's part of that estimating process up front. That's going to affect cycle time. One of the things about these quad coats is a car's in the booth a whole lot longer than a normal. So if I'm used to saying I want 6 cycles a day per booth or whatever, if this color's in my shop, I may get 5 that day or 4 or something. It's really dramatically going to change what I can put through the shop at that point.
What estimators have to realize is, and what the industry has to realize, and even customers, cars are harder to repair than ever before. Cars are more technologically advanced than ever before. The collision repair processes are more advanced than ever before, and now we get into a chemical type thing with paint, which is more advanced than we've ever seen in our entire lives, and everyone thinks you're going in for an oil change. Cars take longer to repair and fix and refinish properly, and the dry times, no matter what kind of booth or anything you got. You're looking at probably a 15 to 30 day repair time on most of the cars that are out there. Not these 3-4 days that they're trying to say or anything like that. I mean, literally, you can get a fender in the morning and just replace the fender. The car could be there for 2.5 days.
Right.
You know, this is the problem that nobody realizes, is because even if the guy just works on it the entire 8 hours each day, you have issues with color, applications, temperature. You know, humidity plays a big part in a lot of different areas. Some cars in
Like in
Arizona,
Arkansas? Does it play a difference in Arkansas?
Oh yeah, no, it's quite right now.
It does today.
It does today. You know, like here, like you got New York, Chicago, all the northern states. You have this issue where you have super cold air at times. Okay, now you're trying to suck in ice cold air into your spray booth to do what? Try and superheat it to get the body, the metal temperature up to 140 degrees. And like you said, you're getting 105. Well, Arizona doesn't have that problem because the car's already 110 degrees when it goes in the booth, but maybe their booth is only keeping it at 110 degrees. It's not bringing it up to the 140.
Right.
And then you got humidity gets involved, and this becomes even a bigger issue for shops. So there's a lot of stuff that's involved that, you know, they don't realize is seen. A lot of their problems, like stuff that you get phone calls about or other paint reps from other companies, is because they're not reading the manual. It's gotten so bad. You guys put up these big posters in the paint department area because they don't read the manual. So now we're going to put up on poster boards so they can see it.
Yep.
You know, this is how ridiculous it's gotten.
Yeah.
It's this handheld holding, make everything easy for read. Nobody wants to read. That's the problem.
Yeah, I don't want to read. I like if someone will read to me. That would be fantastic.
Oh, I got a story to tell you. Wait till we're done. I'll give you a story.
All right, so let's get the meat and potatoes of this. So at the end of the day, our painters are fantastic and wonderful people, and they make things work that sometimes shouldn't even work. But there's a cost to us for that as shop owners, right? I've got labor costs and I've got material costs invested in these colors, and compensation to be factored into these colors. So let's dive a little bit. We're going to go estimating system by estimating system to talk about kind of what's included and what's not included. Now, the hard thing about this is there's no hard and fast rule, right? You can't just say because you have this color, it's X number of additional hours or whatever that's going to be on the estimate. You as the estimator have to work with your painter to make sure that you're estimating these colors or these processes and these procedures correctly. It also means that you must know your P pages, your guide to estimating, etc., like the back of your hand, because we're going to dig into a couple of different places, especially into Autotex, to get everything that we need to do to address these colors.
If you look at the DEG, 98%, I'm making that up out of my own head just based on my own review of the only 12,000 inquiries over the last 7 years, which is sad that there's that little. But most of them are all geared towards welding, repairing, some explanation of the P pages for more labor time, but almost nothing to deal with paint.
Right.
The only thing that deals with painting in the painting area would be buffing. You know, so, and there's questions always about buffing materials, paint materials, and shop materials, which are 3 separate costs. The big issue seems to be no one's asking about paint. And you're involved in paint. You used to be a painter, and then you go around the shops, and we showed you some of the P pages when we were going over this, and you're like, hey, wait a second, what's that include? And this is the problem. Painters don't seem to read the P pages. I find a lot of techs do, because a lot of the flat rate techs, I don't know why shops do this, but make them write their own supplements, which becomes a waste. But they're writing their own supplements because their estimators can't, and they read the painters are not. And the painters don't realize a lot of the stuff that is and isn't included. And I'll make a big argument. We talked about this earlier, and we'll talk about one of the estimating systems, is that they need the estimating systems need to sit down with the paint manufacturers and find out some of this new information and actually update these P pages.
Yeah, it's time. I mean, I don't think we've touched them really since probably the 90s in a way, although I will say right now it looks like every estimating system has made some adjustments based on some of these colors that have come out over the last year.
Ambiguous type statement. It's an on-the-spot evaluation, which just leaves, you know what, here, we don't want to get involved in it, here, you guys argue it out.
I would at least rather them say that it has to be addressed than not address it at all, because that gives me a negotiation standpoint to begin with whoever's across the table for me and whatever role that I'm playing in that particular situation. But it allows that conversation to start. So let's start with CCC. So we talked earlier about application considerations for these colors. And right away, right out of the bat, when you're hitting the CCC refinishing guidelines, they'll tell you the 3 things that are not included is testing the spray out, the tinting of a primer or a sealer, and tinting to achieve color match. So kind of, Larry, I think every car I'm probably painting, and if CCC is my estimating system, I've got some additional labor I need to be adding, regardless of what the color is, correct?
Well, any one of the 3 major database systems, you have extra stuff you have to add. And in this case, yes, a test out spray out panel has to be done on almost every single car. Even though you might narrow it down with your color cards and charts that you have from your paint manufacturer, you're still going to need to test the spray out. Tinting the primer sealer, yes, that's a legitimate tinting thing. I'm going to make it a little dark, a little lighter, because there's one formula on how to mix it.
Whatever L shade, like for instance?
L-shade,
Right, you're going to do that, okay. Tinting to achieve color match is completely incorrect. It's been incorrect since they put it in there. All 3 systems say it. No, it's color mix and match, because the paint manufacturer spent painstaking time to figure out what formula, how many ounces or quarter ounces or micro ounces I'm putting into each color into my mix to be able to spray it. They're going to give me 3 or 4 different formulas. Well, once again, we said earlier, one formula you're kind of screwed. But if you've got 4 or 5 formulas, now you got something to pick from. But you have to color mix and match and then spray out the card. You're not tinting. If I have to tint, I just created a new variance. And it's the most idiotic thing I've ever seen written. And the arguments that go on about tinting, well, if you tint it, then you don't have to blend it. That's another idiotic thing to say. It's stupidity, it's ignorance, it's not knowing. It just tells me already you don't know how to paint, and you're just reading things verbatim, and you're taking the wrong definitions out of it. And really, they really need to change that word to color mix, match, spray out card. And you have to do it on each car. And sometimes you might have to do it for 2 variances out of 3 or 4.
Right.
If you only got 1 variance, you better be on the phone with your paint company, because the odds are you mix and match that color, it's not going to match the car that's there. Right. And that's the big issue that we really have to look at with these systems.
Right, or using the color cameras or some of the things that are out there available to us on the market. But right away I know that when any car comes in my facility and I'm writing CCC, that automatically there should be some additional lines, some additional labor on that estimate. Brian, you and I very rarely see that when we go to shops. They take that book time for gospel, and that's all that's on the estimate. And our painters are getting cheated, right?
Yeah.
Look at miscellaneous. How many times you see miscellaneous? There's 2 items on there. It's like, huh?
There's a lot of things overlooked.
Yeah. So specifically for these coats, the spray out panels are so important. We've already established the importance of the ground coats. So those are things that the estimator and the painter need to get together on. That's that on-the-spot evaluation and determine, hey, because this is a translucent or because it's a quad application or whatever, I'm going to maybe have to do 3 or 4 more spray outs, or those spray outs are going to take me a little longer to do because I've got to mess with different clear stages during those.
And once you get the color, I'm telling you, once you get the color and you get the formula, put it to an RO. A lot of times you get repeat customers. Customer comes back again. Felder comes back in with a blue metallic, electric blue colored Corvette. I can pull the card out and go, oh, here's the formula I used. Mm-hmm. It should be close to that. Now it's my spray pattern, my air pressure and stuff like that would change the color, but at least I'm closer to it because I already did this car once
We have technicians who will capture that very information and put it as a variant and the color code in the mixing software. So when they pull up that code another time, it's already built into the software.
Yeah, getting a chance to learn from each other in a way, so to speak. So those are just some very important things that you have to have. We wish we could say that for every one of these. All right, so Larry, thanks we got a question coming in from Brian, and it's probably going to go to Brian. Is wet bedding going to be recommended with each ground coat throughout the process? Is this these translucents and quads? Is it a wet bed blend?
I had the wrong thing with wet bedding.
Don't.
Oh, okay. I should answer that question then.
Typically, that's a great question.
Why you don't go to summer camp, Larry?
Yeah. It happens, right?
It happens. A little drunk, you just didn't. You thought you were in the room and you weren't.
Typically, the wet bedding, that's a situation needs looked at by the painter. But typically, like an L shade is a solid color. It's not really as critical to wet bed, but you get into the metallic colors, the ground coat colors, or not ground coats, but the metallic base coat colors. You need that wet bedding to help control the flop of the metallic through the blended area.
I just want to ask you a question on something. I'm going to fall on the sword for everybody because I know we have insurance people and shop people. What's wet bedding?
So wet bedding.
Maybe you explain it that way, because I know the painters will understand it, but
sure,
a lot of the other people that are on this show right now may not understand it.
Yeah.
So explain wet bedding. What is that basically?
Well, if you're not at summer camp,
yes,
and you're in a paint booth, wet bedding. For instance, this panel here, the wet bedding process would be basically taking a transparent base coat. It has no pigment to it, and when you walk in the booth, you'll spray the entire panel, and what that does, it creates a substrate for your color, let's say your metallic, to fly through the air and land and stick into. The problem is if you don't do that on some high metallic colors, those metallic flakes stand on edge and makes the side tone of the blend look terrible. So when we add the transparent base coat, a wet bed, that enables that color to blend more effectively and land and melt into the panel.
As opposed to years ago, and I know what wet bedding was, but years ago when we used to paint Kosmosky stuff, he used to say, listen, when you're done spraying the metallic coat on, you have to then take a tack rag and go over the whole card gently, nice and smooth, because some of them land perpendicular and it'll change the color. So you need to break those off so it doesn't give you a different coat. And at the time, wet bedding wasn't a process.
Right.
And that's why we have the wet bedding now, because of these high metallic solids. So that might give some people, a little tune into what this is talking about, because you have you got new terminology for this new technology.
Exactly. So not only if I'm estimating in the CCC system, do I know that I have some potential additional adds for my labor and my color match, my blend time to prep for that, my spray out cards, all the things that the painter's doing before he even can really walk in the booth with a loaded cup and go to town, so to speak. I've got those times to add. Now, CCC has given us a statement on what they would consider if you had a 4-stage color within your facility, which really goes back to say, hey, it's an on-the-spot evaluation, right?
But at least they say something.
Yeah, they said in general a 4-stage formula will require the application of a ground coat in addition to a base and clear coat and a tinted clear coat. The use of a ground coat and tinted clear has not been considered in Motor's 3-stage refinishing, so you can't just go in there and click 3-stage refinish and walk out.
You might have to add something to it.
And then they've given the 4 factors that they think actually are going to affect that in times for the estimator to consider. So we've got those spray out and let down panels that are critical. We've got the application of the tinted clear, which would be an additional step. We've got the tinted ground coat, which will be an additional step there. And then sanding that tinted clear before I come back over with my regular
You got to
clear.
realize a lot of these colors, like Brian brought up before, they have to do it in a 3 or 4 stage. There's some manufacturers out there that are using 5, 6, 7 stage paints at the factory, but it's a different type of paint, so they can do those stages. We have to do it differently, and this is why this stuff has to be attended to differently than a 3-stage paint. This is going to be the problem, the learning curve.
And one of the critical conversations to have is that not every quad coat is a quad coat in the aftermarket. So while it's a quad coat from the factory and they'll identify it as a quad coat, and that may be a quad coat for us using the BASF product. If we switch to another product that day, that paint manufacturer may have come up with a repair process for that color in what they would consider a traditional 3-stage process. However, there's labor there. So don't, just because your paint manufacturer says that that's a 3-stage process doesn't mean that you automatically default to that 3-stage refinishing guideline, walk away and say, I've been adequately compensated for this refinish. Beyond materials and some other things there. We love the point and click. It's a safety feature. It's like a warm blanket on a Saturday night, but it doesn't get us paid properly. So that desire.
It's laziness. It goes back to laziness.
Well, for us in the insurance industry, it's comfort, right? Because we don't know a lot. So to be able to say, but it only pays this, makes us feel real good, and it's
but it becomes excuses.
Yep.
And what has to happen is, much like I said about aluminum welding, you got to weld 5 to 6 hours a week every week. Estimators have to practice, read, and go over stuff. And really, they probably need 80 to 100 hours of training initially to be a just basic estimator. And then throughout that, they got to study or practice 5 to 6 hours a week also on some of the new technology and even what's involved in these P pages. I mean, some of the stuff right now, people are scratching their head going, I don't know, I was in there, and we just went to the DEG now and brought out all 3 P pages and went over this.
Yeah, the DEG is one of those things. I always tell everybody I start every morning on the RTS site from iCar to see what's latest and greatest out there.
RDN.
And then jump over and go to the DEG and see what Daniel and them are doing with the recent inquiries and some things that are coming out. So let's go to what Mitchell says. So I will say, my favorite guide to estimatings, or P pages, so to speak, CCC does a really good job of really telling you included, not included. The others get a little murky, but we know that Mitchell already tells us that blending into the adjacent panels or nearest breaking point, or color match, or tinting, are not included operations. And so that's going to get me back into those spray out panels. That's going to get me back into those tinted ground coats, all those extra things that I need to be adding on the estimate.
And this is where you got to go up and over. You can't leave open blends. You can't use blending stuff for that. And most of the paint companies have made that for commercial vehicles, not for a standard, general population vehicles, a general driving public. And a brake line in a panel is at the edge of the panel, and that's the only way you're going to prevent anything from peeling back or coming back to bite you later on and cause more issues.
Right.
So this is part of the stuff that these guys have to learn as estimators.
Yeah. I mean, you hate to tuck times because everything's different with each product I'm using. So between the different paint lines, things are going to be different. Things will be different between the skill set of my painter who's working that day. But on average, I mean, you're looking at almost an hour to 2 hours of additional time on every estimate just for preparing to paint, not even walking in the booth and pulling the trigger, but a lot of work that I've got to do before I get there. Mitchell did also give a little caveat into what's going on with the transparents and the quad coats, and basically say that it's a small percentage of colors, although we know that's not going to be that way for long.
It's going to explode very quickly on everybody. This is why I said all three got to sit down with all the paint companies and really discuss going over some of this information.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's time to change it. I remember, right in that transition between, non-cleared and now we had clear coats were regular in production. Having that conversation and having to come up with clear coat 2-stage, formulas, we thought was crazy. And then, really early 90s, 3-stage. Oh my God, that's crazy, right? But now it's time. It's really time that we start to take a look at some of this stuff. But Mitchell does acknowledge that these colors may require additional application coats to achieve, I don't want to say hiding, but to achieve the match, because I'm not trying to hide that gray shade as much as I am trying to use it as part of the color effect. And then in instances where more quotes are required, then you better adjust your refinishing times accordingly. So you're in good shape. Now, the confusing one is Autotex a little bit. Autotex, you've got to know how to go to a couple of different places, pull all of that information together, and then sit down across the table.
The bodied section is really great. It's almost like an Excel spreadsheet because it's got check marks for each thing. With their painting, they give you a lot of information up front about what their calculations are and how they calculate it. And then they get down to a few pages in, they tell you what's included and then their refinish times and stuff like that. And as opposed to the other two estimating systems, they do include the labor to cover the car, the one initial car cover, which we've discussed before. There's 5 or 6 car covers you're going to need, not including the welding blankets or spark paper. And then they include one standard color mix match tint cycle, which I don't like that word tint cycle, but mixing cycle, and then check it. That's one included. Now, if you have 3 or 4 variances, it could really range a lot. They're telling you an average is 0.5 per color variant, but they say it can be from 0.1 to 1 hour. So they give a really good, clear, concise way. And they also mention the iCar refinishing program, where I think it's iCar, the iCar finish matching, which is part of their refinishing program, which is the more in-depth one.
Right.
And that really goes over the topics of how micas and colors and reflection all becomes an issue, and this is why you have to make a spray out card to make an achievable blendable match.
Yeah, I think the important thing for Autotex for me to remember, that I try to remember, and then I try to take it, spray out cards, multiple spray out cards is not what Autotex is referring to when they say that one color check is included, right? And with these colors, as we've seen, I may have 3 to 4 to 5 cards out there because I've got different varying levels of the gray shades or different levels of coats of the coverage color versus the clear. So it's not like I've just mixed a color, I'm spraying it and going out and putting it into the card. This is so much more of a complex process that even though Autotex says, hey, 1 is included, you're still adding time.
Yeah, right.
So,
going through that pretty quickly.
Yeah, you're going to burn that up. So Autotex does also have a statement that they've recently released on transparent colors and their position on that. That some of these colors have been identified by the paint makers as transparent. These colors require tinting the primer sealer or additional coats of material to get a correct hiding or color match. And that beyond the third application of a base, you're going to have to adjust those refinishing times accordingly.
Yeah, they did a good job with that. They really mentioned it pretty clearly about what you need to do, and then they kind of dropped the ball on this one.
They dropped the ball on the fourth. Well, I'm going to say this. I think it's just worded very confusingly, which is an opportunity to clarify it a little bit later. Maybe so later on the year, we'll get Autotex to clarify this a little bit. Autotex is one of the few people that has a standout alone 4-stage statement in there. And what I want to draw everybody's attention to, this is what worries me about it. It worries me that when we have this Quadcoat come in to the facility, that a shop's going to say, here's what you owe me, and an adjuster is going to push back across the table and says, no, Autotex says it's the same as a 3-stage. And that's not what Autotex is really saying. They're basically saying at the manufacturer level, here's what happens. But as we talked about, I'm not cooking a car at 400 degrees in the collision repair shop, and I'm not applying material with a robot either. Mm-hmm. So what the manufacturer can achieve and what I can achieve, 2 different things. And so why I appreciate the statement, not really sure this applies to our collision repair centers.
It needs to be rephrased differently. I think the paint companies, all of them together, sitting in a room with some people from Autotex will be able to help them better rephrase this statement. This should almost be in parentheses at the bottom as an add-on of information. Because look, I mean, 2-stage paints, if I'm painting in the aftermarket field 99.99999% of the time, it's going to be a 2-stage paint. If I'm painting a factory 3-stage paint, 99.999% of the time, I'm going to be doing a 3-stage paint. 4-stage, 5-stage, 6-stage paints from the manufacturer, more than likely I'm doing a 4-stage paint job. Highly unlikely I'm doing a 3-stage paint job, but no way in hell am I doing a 5-stage. We don't have that yet. We don't have a 6-stage. So the manufacturer might have extra. We're going to be stopping at 4-stage for some of these newer, wackier colors. Most of the 3s are 3s, almost all the 2s are 2s. And I'll be honest with you, how many times do we see a single stage on certain cars? We have to do a 2-stage. You know, because we need the protection. It's a completely different type of protection. Just like painting the overspray that a lot of manufacturers have in the engine bay areas on certain parts. It's really overspray, but it's a it's a 400-degree baked paint. We have to put clear coat with a flattening agent. And if we don't follow the right flattening agent, because we're going to make it the way we want to look it, you don't realize when it dries on, it's semi-gloss. But then as it dries, and cures, it actually changes color. That's the issue that a lot of these guys don't realize. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, I put extra in there. Now it's really dull. It almost looks like a matte color versus a very low-grade, low sheen and shine semi-gloss. And that's why it's very important, like you said, follow the instructions.
Yeah.
Follow it exactly.
Follow. So let's wrap this up a little bit, because I know, like I said, our painters work miracles, but what really matters to our shop owners is that we're making sure that we're getting the proper labor, the proper materials, the proper compensation for what it takes to do these refinishing processes. So number one, know right now that regardless if you're handling one of these special colors, an effect coat or a translucent or whatever, there are probably missed opportunities on your estimating with your estimators, and you're probably not being properly compensated right now. So the time to train, the time to learn all the varying systems and what your painters are doing and what needs to be added to your estimates, is now, because it's not going to get easier, it's going to get harder. So if we're not collecting on the regular 2-stage, 3-stage, we're going to have even more problems collecting as we go forward. So the time is now to start taking it seriously and dig in. Remember that you're getting paid for all of your spray outs, all of your sanding and labor time associated with all of that, my mixing, tinting, and blending time associated with all of that, and sometimes those over elongated cycle times. We want to make sure that we're getting
car washes you need, cleaning of the cars, or wiping of the car, even with the chemical wipes, the chemical cleaning for waterborne. which you can't wash it with water. It's like washing a car before you paint it with lacquer thinners.
Yep.
It drips out, it's going to take the paint off. So I mean, these are the changes, and people don't like change. And unfortunately, we got a lot of changes going on.
Yep.
It's not what it used to be.
Yep, there's a lot to factor in for that. Now's the time to be having the estimators and the painters work together. We've gotten somewhat good over the last couple years of our estimators and our body technicians working together through the supplemental process and the estimating procedures. The painter's always been the lone wolf that we kind of leave him alone and hope he's in a good mood today, or whatever. But it's time that communication level really pick up as well, because it's just, like we said, it's just going to get worse, so to speak, in the refinishing out there. You guys are going to keep coming up with colors that I go, what the hell were you thinking when you come out with that one? So, and some things to do. So be sure that you seek out some training, work with your paint techs, work with your reps, work with anybody, your estimating rep, your paint, your distributor, your jobber, whoever you need to get brought in so that you can be getting this compensation together. Now, let's talk about next month's episode. So it's going to be right as the week before we go to SEMA. We'll be coming live from the studio, and we're going to cover a topic that I lost my mind on last week, Larry, on social media. One day I'm going to learn to stay off of the Facebook groups so that I can keep my sanity. We're going to talk about seam sealers, adhesives, primers, undercoatings, corrosion protection, all of the little part that makes a huge difference on the overall quality of the repair and the safety, where you use certain primers and where you don't use certain primers.
Why, that Toyota with all the screws holding all the adhesive in is
that
not
was
the right way to do it? That's a great job. He's a special kind of stupid, that guy.
We got to work with him a little bit.
Let's not buy vice grips. Let's just put screws in there.
We're going to solve the mysteries of epoxy primers and where they go and don't go in the collision repair process. Self-etch, where that goes and doesn't go in the process. We're going to sort through all of that. We're also, but more importantly, going to talk about the compensation around those materials when they are used properly in the repair center and how you get paid for them. So I hear a lot of shops say that they probably just really don't do all those steps because, well, Kristen, nobody's paying me for the labor, nobody's paying me for the time. We're going to show you how to get paid for both.
Stupidity is no reason to say I didn't do it because they didn't pay for it. You didn't charge for it. That's the issue. Insurance companies never paid you in your entire life unless it was your personal car.
Yeah, the judges didn't want to hear that as well. So we will see you live next month here on Repair University. Send in your seam sealers, adhesives, and coatings questions. We'll be happy to get those on the show. And if you got any questions about refinishing times and compensation, well, you can always reach me and Larry here on Collision Hub. Thanks.
Don't call us. Call Brian.
You don't call Brian. You like Brian.